just like ask yourself, like, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What is this one vital sign trying to tell me? Like, hey, be on the lookout. The next blood pressure might be higher. You might want to like check all the things, right? Or in a code situation when you're like, okay, now I'm going to put the AED and it's going to tell me, is this rhythm shockable or not? What is this emotion really trying to help me understand? And instead of me trying to ignore it, can I sit with it, right? Can I listen to what it's trying to tell me? Can I notice what is it that I am not acknowledging about the here now? Hi, and welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast, episode number 102. So today's podcast is based on some conversations that I've been having with my clients this past 2 weeks. And I think it's a conversation worth having with all of y'all. And that is the concept of like uncomfortable emotions. So resentment, anger, sadness, all of those. The reason why I wanted to record this episode was because, and these are clients that have been working with me, for months, and ranging from, newer clients and clients who've been working for me for over 6 months. And this conversation has been very interesting to me. And that is like when we notice like uncomfortable emotions and we're experiencing uncomfortable emotions, the conversation that usually happens in our brain is, I'm not supposed to be feeling this way, or I'm not allowed to feel this way. Therefore, I need to bypass this experience as fast as possible. Hey, mama, you deserve a life free of overwhelm and burnout. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. I'm your host, life and mindset coach, Shiro Bergbauer. I'm also a wife, mom, and CRNA. This is the podcast for high-achieving mamas in medicine like you and I. Together, we'll learn how to navigate the ups and downs of working motherhood. If you're looking to thrive in your relationships and overcome overwhelm in your motherhood, marriage, and medicine, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. So what happens is we tend to like override that emotion. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So one of my clients is experiencing resentment towards a family member. And every time it comes up, she kind of like bypasses it. She's like, you shouldn't be resenting somebody, and you should look for things that you like about them, and you should kind of like bypass that emotion and go to the comfortable emotion. And while I totally see the value of like just noticing your thoughts and going to like a more positive way of thinking, this kind of mindset is what is described in many circles as spiritual bypassing, even though you might not be doing it from a spiritual point of view. And so it's described as a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. So like what happens is in many circles is people, instead of working through uncomfortable and difficult emotions or like, just going through the emotions, they tend to like bypass them with spiritual explanation. And now that is not the only way people do that to bypass it, but this is an example. Sometimes it can be as a way of protecting ourselves from like going deeper in that emotion, but it actually doesn't resolve the issue. It actually just glosses over the issue and it just leaves that issue festering without any true resolution. So how do you even know that you're spiritual bypassing if you are spiritual bypassing? Because that's one of the ways. What it means, again, is like hiding behind your moral or spiritual beliefs, and it's preventing you from acknowledging what you're feeling in the now and distancing you from both yourself and other people. Like, because if you're like, oh, I'm not feeling anger, or, I need to like just bypass it. So how does that even look like? So it could be avoiding feelings of anger, or like believing that every traumatic event, every uncomfortable event should serve as a learning experience, or that there's always going to be a silver lining behind every negative experience. So a lot of the time, and this is something that I have learned that is used a lot, especially with people of my faith, which is Christian faith, is, everything happens for a reason. And people say that like very well meaning, but what happens is that when negative things happen to us, we're like, oh, everything happens for a reason. I should probably just like find the good in it. But we can find the good in it after we process the it, right? But a lot of the time that bypassing is just like, oh, yeah, jump to the next thing. It can also be like feelings of detachment, ignoring what is happening in the here and now, being overly optimistic, and sometimes it can be projecting your negative feelings onto other people. So it could also be like you pretend that things are fine, even though they're not, and thinking that you can just overcome every problem through positive thinking. And I think as, the age of like all this information, I have said here before, I love social media. I love the work that people are doing on social. But I think sometimes there's this like whole Insta therapy going on where toxic positivity is like very much a pushed agenda, and, people being told they must rise above their emotion. And, if you're not finding the joy, like you should be, something's wrong with you. I recently saw this clip, and I don't even remember who it was. The guy was talking, and he was like, we need to like fake it till we make it. We need to be happy all the time. And I was like, oh my God, if there ever was a poster child for toxic positivity, this clip of the conversation would be it. And now, again, I don't like drawing conclusions based on like a small clip on the internet. But what was interesting to me is that the people that commented on that post were like, well, yeah, the guy's talking about how we're in an age where everybody wants to feel their feelings. And I'm like, isn't that the point? And it was just a lot of, you could just kind of sense spiritual bypassing. Again, I don't want to draw that conclusion based on a small snippet of mind. So the other thing is, in spiritual bypassing, you could find yourself using denial or repression to like pretend that the things are not there. So let me give you an example of some ways in which people may spiritual bypass. And some of these are like very extreme, but I think they're still worth sharing. So one of them is like, let's say you are angry and upset about something, and you have these thoughts that, the person should haven't done it, or, I'm feeling very hurt. And so you go tell a friend, and the friend is like, oh, don't be so negative. Everything happens for a reason. That's one. Another one is when somebody passes away that's close to you, and this has actually happened to somebody very close to me. People come, very well-meaning people, I will say, they come and tell you, they're in a better place now, and it was all part of God's plan. And I think their intention is really to like condole and calm the person down. But what it really bypasses is what is in the here and now, the grief and the discomfort and, the denial and the anger and all the emotions that come up with grief, and telling the person just like, almost like, get over it because it was God's plan. So when we use that way of like dismissing very real concerns for people, right, it can be very unsettling for the person on the receiving end, right? Some other examples of phrases that you might hear that are very much spiritual bypassing are like, everything happens for a reason, or, it was all for the best, and, it was a blessing in disguise, good vibes only. When you find yourself about to use these platitudes, just ask yourself, what is this comment really helping? If you're trying to give somebody comfort or insight, is that a comfort and insightful thing to say, or are you just dismissing a very difficult situation for a person so you can feel better, right? Are you trying to find a fix for that? I recently had a conversation with my best friend, and we had this like kind of awareness where she was like, there will be times when we have a conversation and I want you as my friend, and there will be times when I will ask you to coach me. But unless I ask you to coach me, like, that's never a thing, right? So in those relationships, we might also find ourselves like, I feel like, especially as a coach, like I always want to find like the deeper meaning and the understanding. But in coaching, there is such a thing as consent. And so when somebody shares a thing with me, I'm now more aware of, what is my purpose in this conversation? Do you want a friend or do you want a coach? And I have a friend, Joy. She always makes fun of me because we work together, and she'll come to tell me something, and I'm like, Do you want the friend answer or do you want the coach answer? And not that they're like super different, but I think it's understanding that what the person is expecting to receive may not be what I'm giving in the here and now. So I know I went off on a tangent on spiritual bypassing, but it's kind of one of the ways in which we dismiss our own emotional experience and also other people's emotional experience. Why should we even explore uncomfortable emotions instead of ignoring them? What I want you to think about is that emotions are literally a part of our life, right? And the reasons why we call them feelings too is because we sense those emotional experiences in our body. And what a lot of people believe is that, oh, if I can just like get in the head part of the emotion, then I'll feel better in the inside. And that's not true because there's a mind-brain-body connection, right? And so we can't cut one off and keep the other. So we experience a wide range of emotions. And of course, comfortable or positive emotions are so much easier to deal with. But then uncomfortable emotions like really require attention. And what we forget is that if we ignore these, they can actually have very deleterious effects on our mental and physical health. But why do we ignore these emotions? One of the reasons is because we are in a society in a time where we are made to believe that it's a sign of weakness to express uncomfortable emotions. Society has kind of made us believe like we have to put on a brave face, we have to stay positive, and just roll with the punches and take everything that life throws at us, right? But this is a very unrealistic expectations. When we also kind of ignore the way we're feeling, we're telling our brain, oh yeah, the only time I am willing to receive your signals is when it feels great in my body. One of the things I offered one of my clients this week is, when you feel resentment or when you feel anger, it doesn't mean you're a resentful person or an angry person. It's just information. Imagine you're in the operating room. You have just, induced a patient under anesthesia. And this is a very anesthesia-specific example, but it will make sense. So your patient's an otherwise healthy ASA1 male. You have put them to sleep. Everything's going well. And you look at the monitor and the blood pressure is 210/100. The first thing that comes to your mind is not, the patient has hypertension, I need to call internal medicine for a consult, right? So we don't take that information piece to mean anything about the patient. Instead, we say, oh, what is this blood pressure telling me? Is the patient deep enough? Are they having, a response to a stimulus of induction? How can I treat in the here and now what's happening? Let's extrapolate that to resentment or anger. When you feel resentment or anger rising in your body, the way we make that mean like, oh, I'm an angry person or I'm a resentful person, it's literally the equivalent of saying, I have high blood pressure because I have this one blood pressure that's high. I should go see internal medicine. When we can detach ourselves from the title and the tag of the emotion is just a piece of information I'm feeling in my body, how can I troubleshoot for that? If you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling jealous, if you're feeling any sort of uncomfortable emotion, can you first sit with that and decide that that does not necessarily mean that you are a bad person or you are a resentful person? Can you just decide that it is just part of the experience of being human is to feel all the feelings and there is obviously a kaleidoscope of emotion, right? When you think about polyvagal theory, which I've kind of talked about here in the past, there is the concept of the autonomic hierarchy. And that is, first, we are either in dorsal vagal immobilization, so we don't take action, or we are in sympathetic, which is fight or flight, or we are in ventral vagal, which is safety. A lot of us, what we want to do is when we start feeling fight or flight or immobilization, we want to do everything in our power to get back into safety, which is a great idea. However, we have to experience the two other states. One of the reasons why we actually end up feeling uncomfortable emotion is because of our need to co-regulate, which is also part of just that polyvagal theory. When we are co-regulated, it means that we are in sync with other human beings. We can connect with other human beings. When we're dysregulated, it means we're either receiving too much too soon or not enough for too long. So imagine the thing that would cause you to feel resentment. It could be, it's been a week, you come home, there's dishes in the sink, your husband is not helping out with the chores, and you are also stressed out at work, and it's just that accumulation, right? So that is too much too soon. when you ignore that, oh, I'm feeling resentment and anger because I'm getting too much too soon, right? You're trying to bypass that experience into being like, okay, I got to find a way to get back into ventral vagal safety. But our body can't get into ventral vagal safety until we acknowledge that we are either immobilized or we're in fight or flight. So when you find yourself wanting to like jump the hoops to get to the positive, comfortable emotion, I just want you to ask yourself, what is my reason for not wanting to understand what it is that my brain is offering me right now to see what's happening? So another example that I have was with a client who was just telling me how she is in a very good phase of her life and her brain is like, this is not going to last. This is terrible. You are like going to like blow it all up. She's in a new relationship. And she was like, I started feeling insecure and I started feeling anxious, and I went and exercised, and I have this mantra that I say, and I thought those were great tools to get through just the emotional surge, right? But what I offered her too was to understand, why was it that she was coming up with this anxiety? Like, why was she feeling anxious that she may self-sabotage the relationship? And what we kind of talked about is when that anxiety comes up, it's because your brain wants to keep you safe from, repeating a past experience. Like if you've been hurt in the past in a relationship and you start feeling anxious in the current relationship, it's important that you kind of pay attention to why you're feeling anxious, right? Because if you try to bypass the anxiety, you miss basically the forest for the trees. Like your brain is trying to offer you, like, you don't want to get hurt again. And if you can just pay attention to that part of you, it's really the part of you that is, trying to protect you from vulnerability, pain, and suffering. It's the part of you that's like, never again will we ever like experience this emotion. And so that part of you will literally try to hyperanalyze and criticize you and, control all the situations because it wants to make sure that you stay safe from pain, vulnerability, and instability. The more you keep shooing that voice away, like, oh, be quiet, I don't want to feel anxious, the louder it gets. So what I want to offer you is like, when you feel that emotion, just like ask yourself, like, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What is this one vital sign trying to tell me? Like, hey, be on the lookout. The next blood pressure might be higher. You might want to like check all the things, right? Or in a code situation when you're like, okay, now I'm going to put the AED and it's going to tell me, is this rhythm shockable or not? What is this emotion really trying to help me understand? And instead of me trying to ignore it, can I sit with it, right? Can I listen to what it's trying to tell me? Can I notice what is it that I am not acknowledging about the here now? And one of the things I was actually sharing with my client is something that I learned from a book by Amir Levin. And it talks about like when you are in a new relationship, and I know this might not apply to a lot of you, but when you're in a new relationship, your body literally produces so much dopamine and norepinephrine. There's like a high supply of that. So you're excited, like your focus and your attention is like, when you're around that person, you're like deeply in love. When you are away from that person, what's also happening in the here and now of this emotional surge is that your serotonin levels are actually lower. And serotonin helps to calm anxiety and obsession, right? So you have a low supply of the thing that calms your anxiety and stops you from being obsessed with somebody. So when you're away from them, guess what happens? The anxiety is super high and your obsession is also super high. So nothing has gone wrong. If you're feeling like, oh, I'm just like obsessed with this person. Are they going to leave me? Do they like me? What if they don't call me? Nothing's gone wrong. It's just like all these chemicals that your brain is producing that are literally like, hey, we're here. Pay attention to us. So going back to the idea of like those uncomfortable emotions, right? It's just important that we just like honor that they're there, that they're trying to tell us something, and we don't have to shut them down all the time. They're there for a reason. Right? They're there for a reason, and they're there to protect us. Those emotions are coming to give us messages to protect us. Now, do we have to indulge in those emotions? No, but can we honor that they're there? Can we honor what their function is and what they're here to tell us instead of just being like, be quiet, be quiet? Because the more we tell that voice to be quiet, the louder it gets, right? So how can you even explore these uncomfortable emotions? So one of the most effective ways is obviously to talk to somebody, right? And kind of just offload that information like, this is how I feel. And it could be a trusted friend, a family member, your therapist, your life coach, somebody that will really just kind of help you like tease out the emotions. And doing that will help you just gain a new perspective and also give you some tools to manage those emotions. The second thing is writing down what is coming up, like writing down the thoughts like, oh, I'm thinking, this person doesn't care about me. I'm thinking this person hates me. I'm thinking this person's out to get me. Writing it out, just getting it out can help you identify some patterns and triggers that create those uncomfortable emotions. And then we can now develop the strategies to manage them. The other thing is just like allowing ourselves to be practicing mindfulness in the here and now to notice what is actually happening. Like, what are we experiencing? Why are we experiencing it? And how do we then create space for ourselves to notice that they're there, right? Like, what is in the here and now? Like, am I getting triggered? Is a past memory coming up? Is it that I have created this like protection aspect of my brain that, helps me, when like it attunes me to danger, it attunes me to something bad is about to happen? What is it that this emotion is trying to give me information about? So I just want you to think about like anger, sadness, frustration. Look at a little child when they are frustrated and they're just like, my daughter does this quite a bit. She will be working on a game and it doesn't work anymore. And she like, this is the worst game. And she gets so flustered, right? We never say to the child, my child is a frustrated human being. We just acknowledge in the here and now that they're frustrated. That's not who they fully are. But for some odd reason, when we experiencing uncomfortable emotions in ourselves as adults, we're like, oh, that must mean I'm an angry person. That must mean I'm a hateful person. That must mean I'm a resentful, anxious person. I just want you to like be able to separate that and tease it out so you can actually notice what your brain is like trying to protect you from, right? Is it trying to protect you from pain? Is it trying to protect you from, using up too much energy? Is it trying to protect you from, discomfort, right? Because again, remember, the human motivational triad is what has kept us alive all these millennia, right? It's the part of us that, helps us avoid pain, seek pleasure, and conserve energy. So if I can bypass feeling this emotion, I might seek pleasure, right? But if I don't notice in the here and now, this emotion is going to keep popping up. It's literally like a whack-a-mole game. The more you ignore it, it will pop up again. So sit in the here and now and allow it to just be. You are not the emotion and the emotion is not you. It's just a part of you. I get, messages from people and they'll tell me, I need, I want to work with you. I feel like I've become a resentful person and I'm also feeling like I'm a hateful person and I just want to be able to get through that. And one of the things I always think about is, are you a resentful person or are you just feeling resentment? Because those two are not the same, right? And so what I always think is, okay, tell me, how are you showing up in your relationship, right? How are you treating the people around you? What are you thinking about yourself? What are you thinking about the people around you? What do you want to be the outcome of your life? Like when you show up, you feel like certain emotions are prevalent in your life, then that's what you evaluate. We're not evaluating you as a broken and messed up person. You're not broken. Nothing's gone wrong. You're just a human being experiencing human emotions. And there is no point of labeling yourself or creating this oh, this is my persona and now I'm known as this person. Just want you to offer some grace and compassion to yourself and notice those emotions. Notice what they're trying to tell you. Dig deeper. What is anger trying to tell you? What is frustration trying to tell you? What is overwhelm trying to tell you? What is resentment trying to tell you? What are you experiencing? What are the thoughts that you're thinking on a day-to-day basis that are then creating these emotions, right? And then we can tease out the coaching part of that. But I think when we at least are okay, I'm having this thought, and this thought makes me feel very resentful towards my husband. And usually that thought is he doesn't care or he doesn't listen. We can then question that thought. But the moment we ignore and bypass that experience, we lose that. We lose the ability to just understand what's happening. What is going on in our body? What is going on in the world around us? Can we tune in to that? it's so important for us to just explore these uncomfortable emotions, because not doing so actually has consequences to our physical well-being, our mental well-being. If we keep ignoring them, we have long-term consequences. And so if we are willing to explore them and understand ourselves and the world around us, then the outcomes are more positive, obviously. By doing that, also, we build resilience and we develop coping mechanisms that we can then bring into other challenging situations in the future. So next time you experience an uncomfortable emotion, and notice I really do try to be intentional about not calling them negative emotions. Take the time to explore it and learn from it, right? Take the time to give yourself courage, compassion, and connection. Give yourself those gifts of imperfection so that you can continue to be the person who you were created to be and who you were born to be. Notice when you are spiritually bypassing your experiences, when you're trying to over-explain and dysregulate from those emotions, and just be wary of again, wellness culture and the fact that that whole, hashtag bless and hashtag good vibes only. It's okay to unsubscribe from that. It's okay to just be able to sit in uncomfortable emotions. And if anybody starts telling you that you're not allowed to feel uncomfortable emotions, I want you to run in the opposite direction. They are lying to you. They are also telling you that the only way to achieve a certain level of understanding and awareness is to just feel the good vibes. They are lying to you. Run. Run from them. All right, Mama, thank you so much for tuning in this week. I will talk to you next week. Have a great week. Bye now. I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you've been listening to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. New episodes are out every Monday. These episodes are created by me, Shira Bergbauer, and produced by Cassidy Mitchell. If you enjoyed this show or found it helpful, please rate it and review us on Apple Podcasts. If the concepts I share on this podcast resonate with you, or you're ready to change your relationships and mindset, I can help you. If you'd like in-depth, personalized support, I'd love to invite you to apply for my Life and Mindset coaching program. Just imagine you and I every week working together as I teach you the tools to up-level your life. To book your free 1-hour consultation call, go to www.stethoscopestoswaddles.com/consultation. You're doing a great job, Mama. Have a great week. Bye now.